I get a lot of questions asking me what model should I ride, what volume should I ride, what shape should I ride, that sort of thing. Across this whole spectrum, I've been riding Firewires mostly in the last few years. I've got a few examples here. This first video is going to be about volume. What is surfboard volume? Volume is the space, hello Nelly, your board takes up in the universe. I struggle with volume and choosing the right volume myself. Don't stop asking me the questions because I'm happy to answer them to best of my ability. My history with surfboards, been surfing for a very long time, and I started on a single fin. I surfed twin fins, surf high performance thrusters. I did shape boards for maybe 6 years, shaped them, glassed them, sanded them. Surfboard literage has been measured more in the last 20 years because of the introduction of computer shapes en masse, so that a surfboard shaper and designer can shape it on the program CAD. She can measure it very precise ways, how much literage that it holds. Whereas if you look behind me, that surfboard there, that high performance thruster of mine, which is from about 20 years ago, been measured with a set of calipers, and the thickness has been measured. Customer was buying it off the rack. They would have to have some experience with what thickness that they were used to riding in the past and do it more by eye and under the arm. So why is surfboard volume important? Surfboard volume determines how well that your board paddles, catches waves, and also how it surfs on the waves. A board with more volume is going to be better for a beginner, intermediate surfer, and probably an older surfer like me. When I was younger, I could ride much skinnier, thinner boards and not worry about the paddling. It wasn't such an issue as it is now. We're going to talk more about upper intermediate into advanced. Surfing has got so big that it's very easy now for shapers, manufacturers to put all of their boards into models, which makes the whole process a lot easier for them and the consumer. It's not only the volume that determines how the board surfs and even how the board paddles. How the plan shape is combined with the volume and where the volume is put that will determine how well it surfs, how well it catches waves, and how it performs. I looked at Firewire's calculator, which I think works well, and I put somewhere between my current weight and my usual weight, which is 78, and I'm about 81, 82 at the moment. So I put in 79, 80, and it came up that in good waves, I should be riding 29 litres, and in mushier, weaker waves, I should be riding about 32. Well, I'm riding 32 all the time. I've got the Revo, which is 5.7. Kind of wish I'd gone for the 5.8 because I had 33 litres in it. And it's 31.4 litres, and I can surf it, I can paddle it, but it's not that much fun to paddle. And as we know, as surfers, the majority of our time is spent paddling out through the lineup and duck diving through waves, getting in position and catching waves, and very little time, unfortunately, is spent actually riding the waves. The Revo isn't that comfortable to paddle. If we were to have a look at this one, you can see how drawn out this shape is. I mean, it's a beautiful board. If I look at the thickness, 2.3 inches. The shaper has put the calipers into the middle and then measured how thick it is. It depends how much the deck is domed, because what shapers do is they leave the thickness in the middle for paddling and buoyancy for helping you float, but they dome the deck so that you end up with a nice, I mean, these rails are beautiful, low profile rails. So the thickness is all there. And what you had to do back in the day when this was happening was actually, well, obviously from riding other boards, you had experience with what thickness worked for you. I mean, I don't know if I could paddle this board now, and I don't know that I'd want to paddle it, but this was the thickness that I was riding, and these boards worked really well for me back then. Literage isn't on this board, and when I've tried to sell these boards, people are asking questions, what's the literage, what's the literage? But of course, I don't know. You can see the old school FCS stickers as well. This thickness is in a nice sleek template. You know, we've got a really nice curved outline, really good for precise surfing, not so great for paddling. I mean, even with this board, there's been a lot of volume left right here above the chest where it should be, but this board is pretty skinny for me. I used to find when I was super fit and slimmer than I am now that I could make a high performance work in small waves because I just had this spring that you have when you're super fit and young, and then you can make more high performance boards work in small waves for you, whereas now I don't have that ability. When I had this board, I was in my 40s, early 40s, yeah, whereas now I'm 56. So these sort of boards suit me much better. But it's also not just where it is, it's also to do with the width of the board. Because I mean, if we put these, you know, if I just lay that one there, you can see, you know, how much of the Cardo that you can see. The same with the Sci-Fi. So let's have a look at the Sci-Fi. I bought this board because I was riding the Evo, but I felt like I wanted something that was a little bit more high performance, but still easy to surf. Now, Sci-Fi was one of Firewire's best models, best sellers. I don't know how many they sold, but they sold a lot. And I haven't actually surfed this board very much at all, actually. I think it's been used 20 times or something like that. Obviously, it's got quite a lot of volume in it. This is 32.3, which is about my sweet spot at the moment. I think the Machado Cardo is very similar to that. The only thing I didn't like, and we'll have a look at the Cardo, is that there's a lot of volume left in the tail, because the tail has width on this board anyway, but there's a lot of volume in the tail. And what I found, and I'm pretty sure it's because of this volume in the tail, is that I always felt like I was kind of floating above the water, and I didn't really like that when I was generating speed. That, and I'll put some clips in and you can kind of see how it jittered along in the water, because there's a lot of volume here compared to the Machado Cardo. Feels much thicker even though it's holding the same volume. This one is much more spread out through the plan shape. I mean, this is a 510, the Cardo is a 5.6, but again, well, compared to the high performance thruster, we can't see so much of the Cardo behind. It still has that fishy, although it's not a fish per se, it has that fishy kind of outline, wide all the way through. I want to surf it some more, but I definitely would probably paint it. You can see how yellow it's gone. Better on the bottom, but it's got a nice bit of width through here, but we're not going to talk about that. I mean, it's quite a sleek, it's well done. You can see why it's such a good seller. It's got a nice rail on it. And then we've got the Machado Cardo, which is very wide all the way through the board. And we have a nice bit of volume over the chest. The beauty of this board is how it's skinnied out through the nose. And you can really see that it's skinned out, thinned out much more through the tail than the Sci-Fi. So I don't feel like I'm sat above in the water. So for me, I feel like for the Sci-Fi at that volume, 32.3, they're exactly the same volume, but they feel very different. This one doesn't feel like it's floating above the water. This board sits in the water really nicely. I really like it, but it's a great paddler. Obviously, not only the volume up front is helping with that, but the width up front here as well. This board is surprising really, because considering the shape and the volume, it does a lot of things that you wouldn't expect it to do, which is do high performance turns, not feel like it's corkying up in the water, because that's quite a lot of volume for me. Like I said before, when you're young, you have spring, paddling is not such an issue, paddle fitness is not such an issue. But this board, because, kudos to Rob Machado, because Rob has thinned the nose out, thinned the tail out, even though it's got this super wide tail, it will still perform in good and big waves. Obviously it's loose, you can push the tail out if you want to. I haven't even tried it as a thruster, only as a 2.5 and a twin fin, a bit loose as a twin fin. So this is a very good example of a board that is easy to paddle and but also has good performance as well, because Rob has thought out the design really well and it'll do a bit of everything. And I can even surf this in very, very small, tiny waves. Talking about volume, is even though I'm riding 32 litres, at times I'm thinking, oh, why don't I just get a mid-length like the TJ Twinser just came out? I feel like, why don't I get a 6.8 Twinser, which is over 40 litres, because I am missing waves a lot, even on these thicker boards. So with surfboard volume affects how many waves you catch, how you paddle, how the board performs on the wave. The tricky part, and it is tricky, even for someone who's surfed for 5 decades, is to get that right so that you don't sacrifice your surfing time, although the surfing time is obviously very small and the paddling time and the catching wave times is bigger, particularly the paddling around, in and out, that you don't sacrifice performance completely for paddleability. But of course, if you're not catching any waves, then there isn't a lot of point being out there. So it's hard, but important to try and get this combination right. And also, very good thing to do if you're unsure, because, you know, like the Revo I bought, it's a little bit thin to me. So what happens? I don't really want to surf it, which is a shame because I love that shape, but I don't really want to paddle around on it. I love the way it catches waves, but do I want to struggle? No, I don't. I want to paddle easily. So it's not easy to get this combination right. Very good idea to demo boards and try boards if you can, or obviously feel free to ask me questions, but bear in mind that I can give you my opinion based on my experiences, but I can't pick the perfect board for you, and it's not that easy to pick the perfect board for you anyway. Under the arm feel is still a really good test for boards. If it doesn't feel right under the arm for me, I did it with a Machado Mako, and I put the 5.8 under my arm and it just felt like a boat. It just didn't feel right, whereas I put the 5.6 under my arm and it felt much better. So don't, you know, if you've got a bit of surfing under your belt, don't dismiss the under the arm test, because you've got that feeling, it's that gut feeling that, yeah, that feels right to me, yeah? If we talk about volume, and I was talking about tail volume with both of those boards, this one has got very little tail volume, very little tail width. It's quite obvious what's going to happen. The board, especially in smaller marginal condition, the tail is just going to keep sinking, and unless you keep it going rail to rail like that, the board is going to sink. Whereas the Machado Mako particularly, you can just sit there for a while. If the wave flattens out, better to surf rail to rail, but with that wide tail, the board will keep going, it will go through flat sections. Same with the Sci-Fi. But with this board, and this is a big reason why I wouldn't surf this board now, is with that tail, unless the waves are really good, the board is just going to sink. And there's very little volume in that tail too, which makes it amazing and high performance and precise, and the board will go really vertical. Whereas those boards, not so easy to go vertical on because of the width and dimensions and the volume, the way the volume is distributed throughout the board. Now there's a really good video by Glenn Pang which talks about volume, and they said in the video that it was very easy to understand, and it is, but it's not like super easy to understand. He says that you should concentrate more on the board's length and dimensions and design than you should on volume, because he feels that everyone is very obsessed with volume now, and I can understand what he's saying in that video, but it's very difficult when you want a certain volume in your boards, and we all vary, don't we? The same height guy as me might not have the same weight, fitness, etc., etc. So I think that's tricky, that makes it tricky. So I'll leave a link in the description of Glenn Pang from Town & Country Surfboards when he talks about surfboard volume. Anyway, summing up, volume is important to be able to paddle well, catch waves well, but it also will affect how the board surfs. So what you're trying to do is get a nice even balance so that you get performance related to your ability, but also that you can paddle and catch waves easily, remembering that most of your surfing is paddling, most of it's paddling, also catching waves. If you don't catch the waves, you're not going to ride them, and the smallest amount of time surfing the wave itself. But of course, you don't want to put all of that effort in and then find that you're on the wave and you can't do what your ability will allow, or maybe you want a board that's going to elevate your performance and make you progress. So it's really important to get the combination right. Obviously, testing and trying boards can really help you. Companies like Firewire put on demo days when you can go out and test a board, and that's a really good idea. Also, surf shops will allow you to rent a board and you can, or test a board, they're called testers, and you can take the board, try it out, and they often will knock that rental price off a board if you go and buy a board. So if it's an option, I'd highly recommend that you experiment and try boards out, try before you buy, because You know, when you talk about any of the top brands, they are very expensive and it's costly if you make a mistake. Very much like a car, as soon as you've driven a new car off the forecourt, the value has dropped considerably. Just bear that in mind, experimenting, investigating and trying before you're buying.